Chapter 4. It was about 7 o'clock in the afternoon on March 28 that Belinda had woken up early. At this time of day, she didn't even have to look at the clock to know that she had at least an hour left till sundown. "Hun." Carefully rocking her husband, she whispered in his ear, as she felt that something was happening with the unborn babies. "Ronnie. Please wake up." "Hey. What's happening, Belinda?" Ron asked as he awoke to his whole body rocking. To make sure that his wife wouldn't accidentally push him off of the mattress, he braced himself with his arm. "I think that it's time, Ron," Belinda said as she carefully propped herself up on his side. "Time?" Ron repeated, not fully awake. Just as with Belinda, Ron also knew, without even opening his eyelids, that it was way too early for their normal waking up time. "Time for what, honey?" He continued to mumble. "Well, I think that the babies are trying to find a way out of me. They're kicking like crazy. My belly has tightened up real hard. I think that I might be in labor." "Labor?" Ron repeated loudly as he suddenly sat up. Now, wide awake, he was instantly on the move as he jumped off of the bed and immediately threw on a pair of jeans, socks, and then his shoes, without even tying their laces. "All right, honey," Ronnie continued as he walked around to her side of the bed, "let's get your shoes on." Then, as Belinda carefully turned over, Ron assisted her in sitting up and then with each individual shoe. Ever since the ultrasound, 3 months earlier, both Ronnie and Belinda had done everything that they could do to prepare for the March 29th due date. Now, within a matter of hours till the due date, Ronnie and Belinda both felt that they were effectively walking into an entire new life, as they left behind the only one that they had known. As Ronnie helped his wife down the steps, leading to the basement level of the house, and then into the garage, Ron had repeatedly used his ESP to alarm both Malachi and Eddie. Just as they were about to enter the garage, both Eddie and Angel met them at the corridor in between, saying that they would contact Karina and David by phone. Seconds later, Ronnie heard Malachi running, overhead, out of his room. "Hey Ronnie!" Malachi hollered. Then, finishing with ESP, "As soon as I get Nicole and Lucifer out of bed, we'll drive to the hospital. Take Eddie and Angel with you." "Hey Eddie and Angel!" Ronnie hollered just before they shut the door. Instantly the basement door reopened as Angel looked out. "You guys hurry up and come with us. Malachi has to get Nicole and Lucifer up. They will be a little behind." Ron finished and then quickly sat his wife in the Hummer, seconds later started the motor as he allowed it to warm up. All, in about 5 minutes, Ron, Belinda, and Angel were headed for the hospital. In the backseat, Angel had quickly found refuge as he fell back to sleep, with his head laying on Eddie's lap. Eddie, himself, was fully awake as he dialed the number to Karina and David, into his cell phone, then quickly placed the device to his ear. As Eddie spoke on his cell phone, Belinda, in the front seat, was on the phone to the hospital letting them know that they were on their way. Though the actual driving time, from the top of Finley Lane to the hospital, only took about another 5 minutes, it had seemed, to both Ronnie and Belinda, that the drive had taken a very long time. Then, just as they pulled into the ambulance entrance, hospital staff members met them outside of the entrance with a wheelchair. As Ronnie helped as much as he could, which meant leaving a backpack of extra clothes in the Hummer, Eddie focused, for the most part, on Angel. Though the pre-made plans, for Belinda's childbirth, included Angel, the indisputable fact is that Angel was still a human being that required sleep. With this in mind, Eddie decided that it was not absolutely necessary to wake the kid up again. Instead, being that Angel was much smaller than the average 13-year-old, decided that he would carry him in the same fashion as he would if it was a young child. Besides that, it was best that everyone within the home got used to carrying a child over their shoulder. Between Lucifer and... where the hell did they come up with the idea of Macaulay and Dondi? Eddie thought to himself. Anyway, that would be a total of 3 very young kids in the house. By the time that Eddie had caught up with Ron, Belinda had been wheeled away as Ronnie was left holding onto a hospital registration clipboard. Turning, to face Eddie. "They're taking Belinda main examination room. They said that I could go in with her as soon as they have her in a bed." As Ronnie spoke, he approached Eddie and then rubbed Angel's back as he remained asleep. He may be young but he doesn't have much stamina. Does he? Ronnie joked. No. But I think that I better have a seat before I lose my stamina. Eddie responded, and then quickly took a seat as he continued to hold the young teenager. As Ronnie had also decided to take a seat, he had simultaneously looked down the hall, where they had just entered the hospital, and saw Malachi, Nicole, and Lucifer all headed their way. Catching himself, just before landing his butt in the padded seat, he quickly stood all the way back up to face his older brother. "Hey guys," Malachi said as his wife, and son approached them. Lucifer wasn't only wide awake but also chewing on a Hot Wheels car. "Well Ronnie. This is the big moment," he continued with a smile on his face. "I know. Within the next 24 hours or so, my life is gonna come to a sudden change. Actually Mr. DeClue." A woman's voice blared out from behind him, "I think that sudden change is gonna happen sometime late tonight." As Ron turned around he found himself facing an extremely heavy-set woman. "Would you please come with me? I'll take you to your wife's room." Immediately following the women's request, Malachi patted Ron on the back. "We're here for you buddy. Keep us informed, okay?" Malachi said. "Hey Ronnie." Eddie spoke up with Angel still asleep over his shoulder. As he turned to face him, Eddie gave him a thumbs up with his free arm. "Throw Malachi your keys so that we can move your Hummer," Eddie whispered loudly. Only moments after Ronnie had disappeared down the hall, Karina, David, and Marie had made visual contact with Eddie, Malachi, Nicole, Lucifer, and Angel. Smiles instantly grew ear to ear as they came over to them. "Hey," Karina said, "has anything happened yet?" "No." Malachi answered, "They just now told Ronnie that he could go in with Belinda." As Malachi spoke, he was attempting to restrain a 45-month-old child that was acting out extremely rambunctiously. "Lucifer. Relax a little." "Hey honey." Nicole spoke up suddenly, "How about I go to the cafeteria and get him something to eat and us something to drink?" "Coffee sounds good." Malachi interrupted. "Yeah it does," Karina said, as she pulled a $20 bill out of her pocket and handed it to Nicole. "Get coffee for all of us. Also, get Angel a soda in case he wakes up. All right?" "Sounds like a plan." Nicole responded, "Will they have a problem with me taking a food tray out of the cafeteria?" "They shouldn't if you. Actually, how about I go with you?" Karina suddenly made a change in Nicole's task as she realized just how much coffee that she had just asked her to get. "That's gonna be a lot of coffee." "Even with a tray," she continued as she quickly removed her coat. As she took it off, David took it into his arms along with his mother-in-law's coat as well. "And while you two are getting the coffee, I'm gonna call my parents and let them know that the time has come," David announced, and then piled all of the coats into one chair that Malachi and his, Nicole's, Ronnie's, Belinda's, and Eddie's coat laid in already. As to this point Angel and Lucifer were still wearing their coats. All in about another 10 minutes, Nicole and Karina were both headed back out to the waiting room with 2 trays with cups on them. As they got closer, to the rest of the waiting family, steam could be seen coming off of the hot coffee. Then, shortly after each and everyone had a cup of coffee, and Lucifer devouring an apple, Ronnie came out into the waiting room to give his family an update. "Well, right now we're just waiting for her to dilate more than the 3 centimeters that she's at right now." Pausing, as he looked at his watch, "They said that if she hasn't delivered by 2 o'clock in the morning, that they will induce labor. This means that within the next 6 hours, I'll be a father." As Ronnie finished his sentence, his mother walked up to his side and lightly hugged him. "And you're gonna make a great father too," Karina said. "Yeah." Malachi interrupted, "You've been a great uncle to Lucifer. And you've dealt pretty well with Angel." To the sound of his name being called out, Angel suddenly opened his eyes to find himself within Eddie's arms. At first, the only way that Angel had known that it was Eddie holding him, was by the scent of pheromone that Eddie's body had produced. A scent that had a soothing sensation to Angel, making it easy to fall asleep each dawn, as he still often shared Eddie's bed. By this time, Malachi, Eddie, and Ronnie had completely furnished Sterling's old bedroom. However, after Angel's initial introduction to sleeping with Eddie, he had trained himself to rely on Eddie's presence, and pheromone scent, to easily fall asleep. Also, with this comfort zone, Angel had quickly entered into REM sleep. It was nearly 1 o'clock in the morning when Ronnie had emerged from Belinda's room again. During that 5-hour stretch everyone, including Patty and Bill, who were also now waiting in the waiting room, had repeatedly had their chance to check on Belinda. Vice versa, as well as Belinda had walked the halls of the hospital as an attempt to rush the dilation. Going back into the room, now with Malachi next to him, he went and stood next to Belinda's side. "Hi Belinda," Malachi said. "How are you feeling?" "Miserable," Belinda responded quickly. "These kids of ours want out real bad. My hips hurt from walking these laps back and forth down the hallway, and I feel so hot. I think that I'm gonna turn into a puddle here on the floor." "I've got more ice for you, hun," Ron said as he held his wife's hand. Then, as he traded the cup of ice for his hand back, he then wiped a line of sweat off of her forehead. "Thank you, sweetie," Belinda responded to her husband as he looked back to Malachi. "Thank you guys for being here, Malachi. Your brother and I appreciate it more than you'll ever understand." Belinda. "I wouldn't miss this for the world. You're part of our family and there isn't anything that I wouldn't do for my brother. I love you guys," Malachi said as he stepped up to Ronnie's side. Then, as he set his right hand on Ron's shoulder, he carefully bent over and kissed Belinda on the forehead. "Any time now, Belinda. Then I'll be an uncle. And, of course, my baby brother will be a father." Looking up to his brother, Ron had almost wished that Malachi could be there in the room during delivery. Suddenly, without warning, Belinda began to have a contraction that had startled her bad enough to spill part of the remaining ice on herself. "Oh Ronnie. It hurts. I think that it's time now," Belinda managed as she instantly began to squeeze her husband's hand. Stepping back, to the door of the room, Malachi stuck his head out into the hallway. "Nurse. Something's happening," Malachi hollered, then quickly pulled his head back into the room. "Hey Belinda. They're on the way." "All right Malachi. Thank you," Belinda said and then simultaneously tightened up again with another contraction. This time, just as hospital staff entered the room, Belinda accidentally squeezed her hand, as she held Ron's, hard enough that Ronnie looked as though he was in as much pain as she was. "Ah. Help the pain go away. It hurts," she cried. Looking at his little brother going through his pain, from Belinda squeezing his hand, Malachi responded to Belinda's cry for help by running to her other side and holding her right hand. Part of Malachi's idea behind doing this was in hopes of possibly relieving the level of pain that Ronnie had been feeling. What Malachi didn't consider in this idea was the fact that she was right-handed. Ronnie was holding her left hand, of which was the weaker of the two. "Mrs. DeClue. It's gonna be all right. What I want you to do is take a deep breath, and then exhale and push at the same time. Understand?" the nurse requested as another nurse entered the room. "Yeah. I understand," Belinda responded and then quickly tried to gain her composure as she inhaled deeply. Then, as she exhaled, she pushed as hard as she could. "All right Mrs. DeClue. Hold up a second Mr. DeClue, how about you come down here? We'll have you cut the umbilical cord on both of your children as they come out. All right?" the nurse continued. As Ronnie repositioned himself at the foot of the bed, Malachi was instantly jealous of his brother. Especially as Belinda then used both of her hands to hold on to Malachi. "All right Mrs. DeClue," a male nurse spoke, "one more time for your first child. Take a very deep breath and then push as hard as you can until we tell you to stop. All right?" "Yeah." Inhaling deeply, again, she took in as much air as she could possibly muster. Then, as she then also grasped as hard as she could onto her brother-in-law's hand, she exhaled and pushed as hard as she could. As she done so, she instantly had a feeling of lightheadedness and then in the same instant of time heard a baby's cry as her first child found its way into its father's hands. "All right Ronnie," the male nurse said. "Put those clips on, close to his belly, and then out between them." With the mixture of emotions that were involved with the situation, plus the bloody mess that Ronnie was witnessing, it was purely luck that Ronnie hadn't passed out. Then, just as Ronnie thought that cutting the umbilical cord might be too hard, the male nurse's voice sounded out again, ensuring Ron of what he was doing. "You're doing a great job Ron, he said as he patted the new father on the back. As Ron completed this part of the talk, all of his senses were instantly narrowed down to his son as the infant screamed and cried. Just after Ronnie had cut the umbilical cord, the newborn was quickly wiped off and then wrapped within a blanket before being set in Belinda's arms. "Hi there, Macaulay," Belinda said, "so it's you that's been kicking me so much." As Belinda spoke, her voice seemed to have soothed the baby as he stopped crying. As Macaulay quieted down, Ronnie stood beside his wife, next to Malachi, and gazed at the infant. "See Ron." Malachi started, "He looks so perfect." As Malachi spoke, he held an arm over his brother's shoulder. "Hey Ronnie." The female nurse interrupted. "Let's get ready to deliver your next child." As the female nurse said this, the male nurse then came to Belinda's side and picked up the newborn. "While you're cutting your daughter's umbilical cord, Ron, we need to weigh Macaulay and check his vitals. Also, we'll give him a quick bath." As the male nurse walked away with Macaulay, Ron, Malachi, and Belinda watched until the infant was out of sight. "Ronnie, come on now." The woman's voice pushed. It was only exactly 4 minutes, after Macaulay was born, that Ron was once again cutting another umbilical cord. With it, once again the room was filled with the sound of a screaming infant. Within seconds, after the umbilical cord was cut, and then the baby was laying on Belinda's chest, Macaulay was brought back into the room, and then laid down beside his sister, Dawn D. "Hey Malachi," Ron said. "Would you please go tell everyone that Macaulay and Dawn D have been born?" "You bet, Ron. I'm happy for you. I'll be right back." Then, as Malachi left the room, Ron went to his wife's bedside and sat on the edge of the mattress. As he had walked his brother to the door, Belinda was then allowed to put her legs down, out of a set of braces that held her legs apart. As he sat beside Belinda, he gazed at her and their kids. "You know, Ronnie," Belinda said, "you can see the portholes in the roof of Macaulay's mouth. See?" She continued as she carefully opened the sleeping infant's mouth with her finger. With the infant's mouth partially open, Ron then placed his finger in Macaulay's mouth as he lightly rubbed the soft tissues. As his fingertip found one of the portholes, he could feel the suction of the hole sealed to his finger to the roof of Macaulay's mouth. As Ronnie immediately withdrew his finger, he found, on the tip of his index finger, what looked to be like a hickey, an area of the skin where blood was forced near the surface of the skin. As Ronnie's attention was on the end of his finger, the room's door suddenly opened as David, Karina, Patty, Bill, Marie, Eddie, Angel, Lucifer, and Nicole walked in. Immediately taking his attention off of his finger, Ronnie, as he remained at his wife's side, looked and then smiled at his family. Staring back at him, 9 smiles seemed to glow as their eyes focused on the sleeping infants. Walking over to his son's side, David wrapped one arm around Ronnie's waist while he used the hand of his other arm to lightly grasp Belinda's arm. As he continued to hold his son and daughter-in-law, he stared at his new grandson and granddaughter. Looking up, over his own shoulder, David had found his wife standing behind him. She instantly put her arms around him. "Hey Grandpa. Can I see?" Lucifer asked. Looking down to his side, David found Lucifer with his hands high above his head. "Yeah," David said with a slight chuckle. "You can see your cousins, Lucifer." With this, David carefully bent over and picked up his oldest grandchild. As David stood back up, with Lucifer in his arms, he held on tightly to the tyke as he raised the child up above Belinda, to where both Macaulay and Dawn D were in plain view. As with Lucifer, everyone was allowed the chance to see and touch the newest members to the family. Because of the fact there was large differences in vitals with Macaulay, it was made known that he should be seen by Dr. Redding later that morning before heading home. Macaulay's vitals were very much like that of his father's, his uncle Malachi's, his uncle Eddie's, and Angel's. With an average temperature of 73.1, an average pulse of 180, and an average respiration of 40 breaths per minute, the hospital staff, whom were not aware of the fact that these vitals were normal for the males within the Declue family, worried for the infant's health. Without wanting to push any issues that might be signs of child neglect, Ronnie and Belinda chose to wait for the doctor. Also, of which the nurses had passed off as a genetic defect, was pre-developed roots to the upper canines along with the portholes within the roof of Macaulay's mouth. Ronnie's, Macaulay's, Eddie's, Lucifer's, and Angel's presence were plenty to prove a genetic difference.
"Well. Good morning, guys," Dr. Redding announced as he walked into Belinda's inpatient room. As Belinda and Ronnie waited for their appointment with the doctor, his parents and grandparents went home. Then, just before sunrise, Malachi, Eddie, Nicole, Angel, and Lucifer all went home. This was only to avoid the clear skies that the recent forecast had predicted. Now about Macaulay. Sitting down on a nearby chair, Dr. Redding opened up Macaulay's medical file along with Ronnie's. "Honestly guys, I don't believe that we have a problem that we really have to worry about. By what I see, Ronnie, just as with your teeth, your son's health and dental is following a genetic difference that is identical to yours, Malachi's, Eddie's, and then, whoever that other young boy, that was just here a little while ago, was." "He's a cousin," Ronnie interrupted. "His name is Angel." "What I find to be odd, of course this is the first female born in your family since your mom, is that your daughter, Dawn D, had what is normally considered as normal good health. And so, whatever it is that causes this deformity, or genetic difference, seems to only be within the male DNA. Therefore guys, I'm gonna just let you guys go home and enjoy the new additions to your family." "Thank you Dr. Redding," Belinda said. "Is there gonna be any follow-up appointments?" "Not officially right now. However, I think, just to make a dental record for your children, that perhaps you guys should see Dr. Lynch." Pausing, as he looked at Ronnie, Dr. Knox came up missing a while back, and so Dr. Lynch is the only dentist available. As the doctor said this, Ronnie instantly looked away from his doctor as the thought that perhaps guilt would show in his face. Also, now with the subject renewed to his memory, the games that Malachi, Eddie, and himself had played, before they had made a feast out of the old dentist, began to replay within his mind. "So," Dr. Redding continued as he stood up. "Congratulations Ronnie and Belinda." With this, Dr. Redding reached out, towards Ronnie, and shook his hand. Then, after shaking Belinda's hand as well, Belinda, Ronnie, Dawn D, and Macaulay all headed home. It was only about 10 minutes, after they had walked out of the hospital, that they were pulling into the driveway at home. Pulling into the garage, they were immediately greeted by Eddie as he had walked into the garage side door. "Hey guys," Eddie announced as he made his presence known. "You guys take Dawn D and Macaulay upstairs and then I'll get your bags." During the last 12 to 13 hours of being in the hospital, items, such as diapers, pajamas, and some minor forms of clothes had accumulated within their room. Now, as they pulled into the driveway and received the offer to help, Ronnie quickly welcomed it. "Thank you Ed. Also, thank you for being there for us last night," Ron said as he unbuckled both car seats. Then, as he handed his son off to his waiting wife, he then picked Dawn D up, leaving behind the items, for Eddie to carry, between the two car seats. Now, with children over their shoulders, Ronnie and Belinda walked around Malachi's and Nicole's yellow Hummer, and then out the door that Eddie had just entered. As Ronnie and Belinda reached the upstairs, Macaulay had woken up just on time to see his uncle Malachi. "Hey. How's my little baby nephew doing?" Malachi said as he wedged his index finger between Macaulay's little fingers. "Here Malachi," Ronnie said as he lifted his son up off of his shoulder, "you can hold him while we figure out the sleeping arrangement." For Christmas, Ronnie and Belinda had received 2 cribs along with the many other items. To this point, however, they hadn't put the cribs together. "Hey guys." Eddie's voice sounded from the base of the staircase. "I just brought up your baby car seats too. I thought that you might want them since the cribs aren't together yet," Eddie continued as he reached the top step. "I was gonna put your cribs to get." "Hey Eddie." Ronnie interrupted, "Thank you, by bringing those car seats up here, that means that you're on top of the game more than I am." "You're welcome. It's just that I know that you guys are busy, the kids were just born." "Hey Eddie." Ronnie interrupted again, "Thank you." Then, as Ron wrapped his arms around Eddie and hugged him, "I am grateful to all of you guys for being right on top of everything for us. Belinda and I owe you guys so much." "No Ron,
Malachi said, "We know that you would do it for us too. Now come on, let's get the kids to sleep so that we can all head off to bed. It's been a long night and a long morning." With this, Malachi and Eddie both patted Ron on the back. Then, as Belinda walked out of the bedroom, she too walked up to her husband and hugged him. "Thank you, Eddie and Malachi. This means a lot to me." Then, without another word, picked up the car seats and took them into their bedroom. Moments later, after an exchange of smiles between Ronnie, Eddie, and Malachi, Ronnie then slipped into the room with Macaulay. It seemed like eternity as Lloyd, James, and Sterling had to wait to see Ronnie's children. Knowing for many years now, the basic details of their twins, had made this moment in time seem to take forever. Then, as Belinda and Ronnie brought the infants into the room, all that Lloyd, James, and Sterling could do is watch in awe. "Look, Lloyd," Sterling said as he pointed at Macaulay, "he looks identical to his father." "Yeah, you're right," Lloyd agreed, "except that Macaulay doesn't have Ronnie's blue eyes." "Lloyd and Sterling," James spoke up with a lot of excitement in his voice, "look at Dondee. Her hair is all curls." As James leaned up against Ronnie's and Belinda's bed, he carefully wedged his index finger between Dondee's fingers. As James intentionally caused Dondee to feel his touch, Dondee had followed him closely with her eyes. "I'm surprised how well that she is able to watch you, James," Lloyd commented as he watched James interact with Dondee. "Most infants are not able to see that well right after birth. It usually takes at least a month or so before they can focus their eyes good enough." "You mean that they're blind when they're born?" James questioned. "No. Not blind. What it is that when you're grown up, or at least beyond that point of your first month of life, your eyes will work together to produce what we see as being one picture. Or at least what we interpret as one picture. When a baby is first born, his or her eyes haven't learned to work together to produce that one picture. Therefore, what they see are two different pictures overlapping each other. What you and I would call double vision. So right now, Dondee sees me having 2 noses and 4 eyes?" James asked. "Yep. And 20 fingers. While James and Lloyd went back and forth about the vision of a baby, Sterling kept looking at Macaulay as he had closed his eyes and dozed off. Then, moments later, both Ronnie and Belinda prepare themselves for bed and then move their children side by side, together on the floor, and then carefully laid a blanket down over them. Moments later, after Belinda climbed into bed, Ronnie turned out the bedroom light, then climbed in beside his wife. "Well, guys," Lloyd announced, "let's go on out and see what Lucifer is up to." "Angel too," Sterling interrupted. "I'm still not so sure about him." "And where do we know him from?" Sterling continued. All 3 of the guys, James, Lloyd, and Sterling, had felt that they either knew or recognized the kid from prior to his move into the Declue residence. "Good question," Lloyd answered. "Hopefully soon we will figure out where he came from. Or know him from, that is." Then, moments later, both James and Lloyd went towards Lucifer's room as Sterling headed for Eddie's room where Angel had slept since he moved into the home. As Sterling reached Eddie's bedroom, he had found that Angel had already fallen asleep on the outside edge of the bed as Eddie was still awake, on the inside edge of the bed, reading a book. Then, as Angel had slightly jumped, in his sleep, Eddie looked off to the edge of his book and looked at the sleeping teen. With one hand, Eddie carefully pulled the corner edge of the blanket over Angel's eyes, a little more than what it already had been, to help guard him from the bedroom light that Eddie kept on until he was finished reading. Moments later, Eddie was, once again, reading his book. Kneeling beside the bed, Sterling stared at a portion of Angel's face that was still exposed. "Where do we know you from, Angel?" Sterling asked himself. Then, as Sterling rested his back up against the wall, while he sat Indian style, he bowed his head and closed his eyes as he tried to picture Angel's face from somewhere within the past. Within that first second, Angel opened his eyes and looked towards Sterling and then quickly closed them again. As James and Lloyd walked into Lucifer's room, they had found that the 45-month was still very much awake as he laid on his bed with a coloring book and crayons. As Lloyd stood over Lucifer's head, he could see that Lucifer was coloring a picture of Woody Woodpecker. "See, Lloyd," Lucifer said as he looked up. "Woody Woodpecker is a birdie." "You're right, Lucifer," Lloyd responded, "he is a birdie. But can you tell me how many feet he has?" 1. Reaching out with his left hand, he pointed. 2. Looking back to Lloyd, and then to James, he continued. "And he has a whole bunch of feathers," the child answered. "How high can you count, Lucifer?" James asked as he too walked right up to the bed. 1, 2, 3. As Lucifer counted, he indicated the count with his fingers, now holding 3 fingers up. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On and on Lucifer counted until he had reached 100. Then, after counting, Lloyd asked Lucifer to recite the alphabet. As Lucifer successfully went from A to Z, Lloyd and Sterling both looked at each other. "And to think that he has another year before he starts kindergarten," Lloyd said. "Before September of next year rolls around, Lucifer is gonna be a genius." "Yeah. Thanks to Sterling," James commented. "Sterling has put at least 8 hours per day into teaching Lucifer." As James looked at Lucifer's coloring, he could see that the picture of Lucifer's favorite bird was colored perfectly. Solid color. The correct colors, according to the cartoon channel, and all within the lines. If they hadn't seen it for themselves, it would have been hard to believe that an adult hadn't colored the picture. "Where is Sterling?" Lucifer asked as he changed the subject. "I haven't seen Uncle Sterling in a while." "Uncle Sterling is down in Uncle Eddie's room watching him and Angel." "Hey Lucifer," Lloyd continued. "Yeah, Uncle Lloyd. What do you think about Angel?" "What do you mean? Do you like Angel? Is he nice to you? Or is he mean?" "He's not mean. He don't really play that much though. Yeah, I guess that I like him." As Lucifer was talking, he suddenly paused as it looked like that he had gotten lost within a thought. "I think that I've seen him before prior to moving into our house." As the words came out of Lucifer's mouth, both Lloyd and James began to stare at one another. "I'm gonna go to bed now, guys," Lucifer announced, and then immediately got off of his bed as he put his coloring book and crayons away. Then, just before turning off his bedroom light and closing his curtains, he quickly ripped off his shirt, shoes, and pants, throwing them on the floor. And then dived onto the bed as he climbed under his covers. "Good night, Lucifer," both Lloyd and James said. "Good night." After about an hour or so, Eddie folded over a page within his book, and then carefully climbed out of the bed. Without waking Angel up, Eddie carefully untied his shoes and pulled them off, then, just seconds later, pulled off his shirt, turned off the bedroom light, and then climbed under the covers beside Angel. "Well," Sterling said out loud, "I'll see you guys when you get up." Though Sterling was well aware that nobody could hear him, he stood to his feet as Eddie covered himself up with the covers and then left the room. Then, as Sterling rounded the corner, heading up the first flight of stairs, he met Lloyd and James as they headed down the stairs. "Hey Sterling," James said as they huddled together on the landing that separated the 2 short flights of steps. "Yeah, James? You have done a great job at teaching Lucifer." Looking towards Lloyd, him and I were with Lucifer, in his room. "And I'm telling ya, I've never seen a 45-month-old as smart as he is." "And," Lloyd interrupted, "he's still got another year before he even starts kindergarten." Then, as Lloyd looked Sterling directly in the eyes, "Also, Lucifer says that he recognizes Angel. He says that he doesn't know where from, but knows his face." Though Angel had lived with the Declus for 4 months now, between Malachi, Ronnie, Belinda, Lucifer, Sterling, James, and Lloyd all knew that they had recognized Angel. They had all decided that they had known his face prior to the explosion in Grand Junction that had plastered the orphaned child in every newspaper and news station. Nobody had felt anything negative or bad of the recognition. It only deepened curiosity. With this, there wasn't anyone, within the Declus family, that had felt any reason to dislike or distrust the child. The one thing that everyone was sure of anyhow, is that they loved Angel just as another member of the family.
Opening up his eyes, as he had awoken to a cold chill on his back, Malachi found himself laying on some sort of a cement block. Quickly, sitting up, Malachi had almost instantly realized that he was locked into one of his nightmares. From his sitting position, Malachi looked around himself to find that there were others around him, as they had also laid on cement blocks. Slowly and quietly, Malachi supported his body weight on the palm of his hands, as he carefully slid off of the cold surface. All along, as he took his time reaching the floor, Malachi kept his eyes on those around him as they continued to lay motionless. Standing firmly on the ground, and moving slowly, being sure that he didn't drag his feet on the floor, he approached one of the beings that continued to lay motionless. Then, daring himself to even breath as it may give him away, he looked into the face of the closest individual to him. "Oh my God! It's Ronnie!" Malachi thought to himself. Then, as he had also instantly realized that Ronnie was breathing, placed his hand upon his little brother's chest and shook his body. Doing so, Malachi had simultaneously created a cloud of dust that had covered Ronnie's body. "What's going on?" Ron asked as he sat up. Finding himself facing his brother, of whom was covered in a thick layer of dust. "Malachi, what's happening?" "I don't know," Malachi responded, and then momentarily looked around himself as he counted at least 4 more people laying under thick layers of dust of their own. "I think that we're within one of our dreams, Ronnie." Beyond knowing his brother, up to this point, Malachi had felt hesitant to approach one of the others laying down, as he feared that it could be a trap set up by Miguel Sanchez. Beyond the surrounding space was the usual fog-filled dungeon that all of their past nightmares had taken place in the past. Ever so quietly, Ronnie let himself down off of the cold makeshift slab that had caused his entire body to feel cold. Then, without making any other moves, he stood side by side to his brother. Without moving into any direction, both Ronnie and Malachi looked as far into the distance as they could, over the other sleeping bodies, and then through the thick fog that laid real thick, like a large gray-colored quilt over everything. In the distance a loud banging could be heard. A sound like as if something metal was hitting cement. This sound was repetitious like as if someone was using a hammer. Then, as Ronnie looked at his brother's foot tracks, within the thick layer of dust and dirt on the floor, he visually followed them back to the cement slab that had been recently cleared of its thick dust and dirt. Fearing what or who may be laying on top of the other cement blocks, Ronnie turned around to look at the top of the cold box that he awoke from. As he continued to look at the top, he had found an image engraved in the hard surface. "Hey Malachi," Ronnie whispered loudly, "look at this." Turning around to face where his little brother was pointing, he saw that, under the remaining dust, that Ron hadn't knocked off, when he got down, was partially covering some sort of emblem or design. "What is it?" Malachi asked as he immediately began to remove dust off of the surface. Seconds later, with dust now flying around thick in the air, an etched picture, of what looked like a cross standing on some sort of a ribbon, appeared. Then, as Ronnie also took a closer look, it appeared that the top of the cross had been bitten off. Not literally bitten off. It was designed to look as if it was bitten off. "Ron. Something is written under it," Malachi said as he had nearly laid, chest down, on the cold surface. As he continued to improve his view of the small print, he then clearly turned his neck, then blew on it, to get rid of some remaining dust, and then clearly saw every word. Miguel Sanchez, born October 31, 1775, executed on July 19 of 1921. Immediately, Malachi jumped back down to the floor, backed away from the... "It's a burial vault," Malachi said harshly as he also pulled Ron along with him by the arm. "It's got Miguel Sanchez's body in it." "Wha? What's going on?" a woman's voice said suddenly from behind them. Turning around, surprised, both Ronnie and Malachi turned to find Belinda sitting on the edge of another vault. "Belinda," Ronnie said loudly. Then, as he quickly moved to his wife's side, he offered a hand as help for her to get down to the ground. "Come on down, hun," Ronnie said as he realized that it was in fact another vault by the edges of the cement that sat on top of the concrete base. Taking her husband's hand, Belinda carefully jumped the short distance to the floor. "What's going on, Ronnie?" she asked as she began to shake dust and dirt out of her shirt. "I'm not 100% sure, Belinda.
Ron answered as he then immediately pushed the thick layer of dust off of the vault that his wife was just on. Then, just as his brother had done to the other vault, blew air, with his mouth, to clear the remaining dust off of its label. Like the first one, this one was also engraved below a picture of a cross, on a ribbon, with its top portion bitten off. This label read, Arnofonso Sanchez, born March 12 of 1901, executed July 19 of 1921. Daddy. A child's cry suddenly cried out, "What's happening?" Turning around, Malachi found his son sitting on the ledge of another vault. "Stay there, Lucifer. I'll help you down." Malachi responded to the cry of his young son. Then, carefully, Malachi set his nearly 4-year-old son on his left hip. Using his right hand, Malachi shook most of the dust out of his child's hair, face, and clothes. "Daddy. I'm scared." Though his father was now holding him, the child began to shake as he quickly realized that he was within another nightmare. As he continued to cry, Malachi hid him tighter and closer to himself. "Hey Ron." Malachi spoke up as he saw his brother holding on to his wife. "There's 2 more to go. Let's wake them up." Immediately, Ron let go of his wife as he walked towards another body. Before he had gotten any distance, Belinda instantly reached out and grabbed her husband's arm. "Be careful, Ron." Then, together, they both walked up to the vault. Just as they reached the cement box, Eddie had suddenly sat up on its edge, causing the flow of fog around them to move, like a wave, within the slight rays of light that appeared from the distance. It was this light that made the thick layers of dust and fog stand out clearly. "Hey Eddie. We're here with you, dude." As Malachi spoke, Eddie just stared into his direction. As Ronnie, Malachi, and Belinda looked at Eddie, they had soon realized that it wasn't them that he was staring at. Now, as they all stood next to him, they all turned their heads to look into the direction that Eddie had also been looking. "Who is it?" Belinda asked quietly. As they all approached the last one of them that hadn't been woken, they quickly found that this individual was not covered by any dust. In fact, "Angel!" Eddie hollered as he also cut ahead of everyone else. Immediately, Eddie placed his hands on the teen and found that Angel wouldn't respond. Then, as Eddie put his face close to Angel's face, Eddie found that the child wasn't even breathing. Instantly he popped open the top 2 buttons of the shirt that Angel was wearing and felt his chest. "He's cold," Eddie said as he began to shake. Partiality climbing onto the vault, Eddie then ripped the teen's shirt completely open, exposing his entire chest and abdomen. Then, as he laid his ear to his chest, he tried to hear a heartbeat or any sign of breathing. "Oh no guys. I think he's dead." Eddie began to lightly cry. "Something's not right here guys," Malachi said as he took in the whole picture. A picture of which showed 6 people laying upon 6 separate vaults, of which only 5 were completely covered with dust and dirt, no foot tracks going to or from any of the vaults, and then the only one that was apparently dead was Angel, who happened to also be the only one not covered in filth. In fact, fully dressed in a suit that appeared to have never seen a particle of dust. I don't know what's. In mid-sentence, the hammering sound, that could be heard in the distance, had suddenly stopped. Replacing that banging sound was a sudden shrill scream off into the far darkened dungeons. "Daddy. I'm scared. Let's all go home." Lucifer began to cry. With his complaint, Malachi then held his son tighter as they turned back to face Angel. "Where is he?" Belinda asked as they had all simultaneously found him gone at the same instant. Rubbing the top of the vault with his arm, Eddie had momentarily disbelieved his own eyes. Still, the vault didn't have as much as 1 speck of dust on it. As Ronnie quickly climbed on top of it to read its label, Angel Coleman, born on October 31 of 2008, died on. It's blank. There isn't a date for his death. "That's because he isn't dead," Eddie said. "Miguel is trying to play games with us. I bet Angel is at home still asleep." Bang. Bongo bang. 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 Instantly, jumping back away from Angel's vault, Malachi, Ronnie, Eddie, Lucifer, and Belinda were soon standing about 20 feet away from the cement structure staring at it. "Daddy. Please let's just go home."
I'm scared, Lucifer continued as he buried his face deep into his father's neck. Then, before they had even fully grasped what was happening, they heard footsteps approaching them from behind. Only partiality turning, scared to put Angel's vault out of their sight, each and every one of them seemed to notice, all at once, a silhouette approaching them through the thick fog. Then, stepping out of the fog and shadows. It's Miguel. Instantly, turning around, all of them began to run with Ronnie and Belinda leading the way. Looking behind them, as Eddie trailed behind everyone else, Eddie could see the old man right behind him. Looking back again, Eddie could see that Miguel had an axe in his hands as he was right behind them. Run faster, guys. Run faster. Afraid that Lucifer might fall, Malachi tightened his grip onto the child and whispered into his ear that he was all right. His attempts to relax his son were almost failed solely due to Eddie's yelling as they still fought to get away from Miguel Sanchez. Then, just as he began to slow down, suddenly found himself just in front of their pursuant as he began to raise an axe high into the air. Come on, Malachi, Eddie yelled. Hand in hand, Ronnie and Belinda ran as fast as they could. Putting his right hand behind him, Ronnie tried to reach out towards his brother as he saw that him and his nephew were falling behind. Malachi. Malachi. Please wake up, Nicole cried as her husband seemed to be running in place, while on his side in bed. About 5 minutes earlier, Nicole had run down the hall and into Ronnie and Belinda's room for help, just to find out that both Ron and Belinda were also having nightmares. Then, as she walked out of their room, she heard Lucifer screaming, in his room, as he pleaded for his father to please take him home. Now, back at her husband's side, she continued to yell in hopes of bringing him out of the depths of the bad dream. Honey. Please wake up. Soon, another 10 minutes had passed when she decided to go get Lucifer. Then, as she walked into his room, she found him in a strange position. As he continued to cry. On her own, Nicole had assumed that her husband was perhaps carrying Lucifer within their dream. This guess was made based off of the fact that Malachi was whispering to Lucifer earlier. As Nicole attempted to wrap her arms around her son, she found it to be almost impossible to get any grip. Then, as she had laid down beside him on his mattress, she wrapped her arms and legs tightly around his small body as she then intentionally dropped her body weight off of the edge of his bed. At first she was suspended in the air off of the mattress as she held her grip, but then, seconds later, fell to the floor with her son in her arms. Instantly, and simultaneously, Nicole could hear Malachi, in their bedroom, screaming for Lucifer. Quickly, standing up, Nicole held her son tightly in her arms as she walked out of the room. Lucifer. Wake up, honey. Wake up, Lucifer. Nicole began to yell. Frustrated, Nicole had began to cry as too much was happening all at once. As she stood, in the hallway, Nicole began to feel helpless as she held her son. She couldn't wake her husband up. She couldn't wake Ronnie or Belinda up. And she couldn't. Mommy. Help Daddy. Miguel is gonna get him. Lucifer suddenly began to sob. Lucifer. Lucifer, Nicole said loudly to get his full attention. What, Mommy? He responded as he wiped tears off of his face with his hand. Is Aunt Belinda and Uncle Ronnie in the bad dream too? Yeah. And Uncle Eddie and Angel too, Lucifer continued. But something is wrong with Angel. Uncle Eddie says that Angel is dead. Oh no. Nicole screeched loudly as Lucifer said this. Then, instantly, turned to go downstairs with Lucifer still in her arms. Only about 2 minutes later, Nicole had opened Eddie's bedroom door and found Eddie to also be running in his sleep. Beside him, she found Angel to be totally motionless. Okay, Lucifer, Nicole said as she set him down. You just stay here and sit down. I've gotta help Angel. Then, as she carefully put her face close to Angel's body, she then wrapped her arms around him and pulled him off of the mattress. With Angel in the center of the floor, she found it to be strange that his sweatshirt was ripped all the way down the center, from top to bottom. Quickly, however, as she pulled the shredded material out of her way, she lightly set her ear to his chest. As she listened for about 30 seconds, she had heard his heartbeat only twice, and during that time he hadn't taken as much as one breath. Sitting up quickly, she gave Angel 2 full breaths of air, and then, Nicole put both of her hands together, over his sternum,
and about a palm's width of distance up from the base of his sternum. Instantly, Nicole pushed down on Engel's sternum, about an inch's worth of compression, and then continued to do CPR compressions with a 5-to-1 ratio with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, for about 2 minutes when suddenly the teen began to cough. Sitting up real quickly, Angel found himself in the center of Eddie's bedroom floor, with Nicole, in tears, over his body, and his sweatshirt torn to shreds. "What's going on?" Angel asked, as he had also noticed that Eddie was either kicking or running in his sleep. "Everyone is having a bad nightmare," Nicole responded as she held Lucifer with one arm and then reached out to hold Angel with the other arm. Scared, Angel had, more than less, allowed himself to melt into Nicole's arms. Looking, on a nightstand next to Eddie's bed, next to a book that Eddie had been reading, Nicole spotted Eddie's cell phone. Reaching forward, Nicole grabbed the phone and then quickly dialed Corina's number. "Hello?" Dave answered. "Hey David. Is Corina there?" Yeah, Nicole. Just hold on a second honey and I'll get her for you." "Thank you David," Nicole answered. Though it was only a few seconds, it seemed to take forever for Corina's voice to be heard on the other end. "Hello. Hey Mom. We've got a problem over here." Nicole began to cry again. At the same time, Angel's and Lucifer's hold on her had tightened, as if to comfort her. "What's wrong honey?" Malachi, Ronnie, Eddie, and Belinda are all involved in an interactive nightmare right now. Lucifer was in it too. I got him out of it and awake. Angel was also badly affected by the nightmare. I ended up having to do some CPR on him." "CPR?" Corina repeated. "Oh my God Nicole. I'll be headed over there in a minute, alright honey." "Okay Mom. I'm downstairs in Eddie's room holding Lucifer and Angel. You'll need your key to get in." "Alright dear. I'm on my way." "Lucifer," Malachi yelled loudly as his son was suddenly ripped out of his arms. "Lucifer. Where are you?" Malachi continued to yell as him, Ronnie, Eddie, and Belinda all continued to run. As Malachi ran, he had began to cry as well, as the thought that his son may be hurt, or even worse, had crossed his mind. "Hey guys!" Ronnie yelled, "We must have outran Miguel, he's not behind us." As Ronnie continued to speak, he had kept running with plans to stop running, only after it was okay with Eddie, Malachi, and Belinda. Also, as Ronnie spoke, he knew that his brother was crying, in thoughts that something may have happened to Lucifer. "Well, let's stop then," Eddie shouted back as he immediately put his hand on Malachi's shoulder. Then, from the opposite side of him, Ronnie was holding his brother. In the distance Miguel's voice could be heard as he seemed to be laughing or muttering to himself. "Malachi." Ron spoke up, "I really feel as though Lucifer is alright. I believe that if something was wrong, that we would know about it. I'm serious Malachi. I think that there has to be a logical explanation to why Lucifer isn't here with us right now. I was holding him just fine, then, out of nowhere, something grabbed him. Then he was gone," Malachi continued as he explained the incident. "I wanna know what that banging sound was in that vault with Angel's name on it. And what is wrong with Angel?" Eddie went on. As Eddie continued to process the thought, he looked down, towards the ground, and scratched the side of his head. "I don't know," Ronnie answered. "I just wish that we would wake up soon so that we can answer these questions." "Nicole," Corina shouted as she unlocked the front door. Based off of what Nicole has said on the phone, she had brought her mom along as well. Heading directly down to Eddie's room, both Corina and Mrs. Sanchez had found Lucifer, Angel, Nicole, and Eddie in the room. Still, to this point, Eddie was still within his nightmare. Only now, he wasn't moving as much, only shaking. "It's gonna be alright Nicole," Corina continued. "My mom is gonna stay here with you guys and after I call for an ambulance, am gonna go to the hospital with Angel. Afterwards we'll come directly back here. We'll call for a cab or have Malachi's and Ronnie's." "I could fly us back," Angel interrupted. "I know that you could dear," Corina said. "I'm worried about your health. I don't want anything to happen to you. Alright? Okay. Angel responded. As Karina finished speaking, she pulled out a cell phone from her pocket, dialed 911 and then put the cell phone to her ear. 911. Do you have an emergency? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I do. I've got a 14-year-old male child here with me that we had just performed CPR on. The procedure worked, however, I believe that he should be seen in the emergency room. Alright. And you are calling from the intersection of 9th Street and Finley Lane, right? Correct, we are in 890 Finley Lane. The yellow house on the corner. Karina explained. Alright, ma'am. Would you please stay on the line for a moment while I dispatch the ambulance? Yes, I will. Then, as Karina listened, she could hear the dispatcher call for the ambulance. ALS from City. ALS from City. Be advised that your ambulance is being requested at 890 Finley Lane, for a 14-year-old male child who had cardiac failure. Repeat. Your ambulance is being requested at 890 Finley Lane for a 14-year-old male child who had cardiac failure. City clear at 2125. City ALS. Be advised that will be 10 to 8, 10 to 34 to 890 Finley Lane. Also, would you please give us an update on that child? 10 to 4 ALS. Please stand by. Hey ma'am. Are you still there? The dispatcher asked. Yeah. I'm still here. Good. Now what is this child doing right now? He's sitting down next to me. Is his chest hurting him? Not really. He's just very confused about what just took place. Alright ma'am. Please stay on the line. I am gonna relay this information to the ALS unit that's on its way to your residence. Okay? Yes ma'am. Karina responded, and then pulled Angel close to herself as she kneeled down on Eddie's bedroom floor. Hey Nicole. I want you and my mom to keep a close eye on Ronnie, Malachi, Eddie, Macaulay, Lucifer, and Don D. I'm gonna go with Angel when the ambulance gets here. Hi Angel. My name is Steve Troxel. I'm an ENT. I'm here to help you. Alright? Okay. Angel responded as the medic had him lay down on a gurney. Then, only seconds later, the EMT removed Angel's torn sweatshirt and then began to place stickers over his chest and side. Moments later, as Angel had finally seen Karina, after the rear doors of the ambulance were closed, the medic carefully rolled Angel onto his side, then placed a big sticker near his shoulder blade. Okay Angel. The medic began to talk again. This procedure won't hurt at all, alright? Alright. Then the EMT took a rubber hose, put part of it in his nose, and then the other end attached to a green tank. Hey Angel honey. Karina spoke up, I'm here for you bud. With this said, Karina took a hold of the teen's hand. Watching out the living room window, Mrs. Sanchez watched as the ambulance headed down Finley Lane with its lights flashing. Then, just before the ambulance was out of sight, its siren could be heard as it approached its first intersection. With nightfall quickly coming over western Colorado, the flashing lights, on the ambulance, could be seen for some time afterwards. What's going on? Malachi asked, causing his grandmother to nearly jump out of the living room window. Malachi. Rushing to his side, Marie wrapped her arms around her grandson and squeezed tightly. Moments later, Ronnie came walking out of his room with Belinda, each holding a sleeping infant. Grandma. Where is Nicole and Lucifer? Malachi asked as sweat rolled down from his forehead. They're down. We're coming Malachi, Eddie shouted from the basement. Then, as Malachi looked down the stairs, saw his wife and son leading the way up the steps. All in about 3 minutes period of time, from the time that the ambulance had left with Angel, everyone was wide awake and worried for Angel's health. That's weird, Eddie said, in our dream he was dead. And then, in reality, he was dying. Guys. Marie interrupted. My grandfather, Miguel Sanchez, is why Angel almost died today. And Malachi interrupted, tried to kill Lucifer. Yeah. Now I think that you guys need to go to the hospital and watch for Angel. Make sure that he's alright. And, make sure that he knows that you guys are there for him, Marie said. I'll watch Lucifer, Don D, and Macaulay. Hey Grandma. Nicole interrupted. Belinda and I will wait too. Nicole could see fear in Belinda's face still from the nightmare. I don't think that extreme heights will help her nerves. Well then Malachi, Ronnie, and Eddie. You guys get down there and then bring Angel and your mom home when they're done. Mrs. Sanchez finished. Then moved to the side as the boys headed for the sliding glass door. Stepping out onto the porch, Malachi, Ronnie, and Eddie individually immediately took flight to only about 200 feet high. Just high enough that they could see the hospital from over their own house. As they hovered for a moment, still over their roof, Eddie pointed, into the darkness, at an ambulance's flashing lights as it neared the hospital. There they are. Let's see who can get there first. Ronnie announced and then departed so quickly that it appeared that he had only vanished. Then, in just that very split second, Ronnie had turned his head back, towards where they had started, to see where Malachi and Eddie were. Landing, next to the emergency room entrance, while his head was still turned, Ronnie turned, to face the hospital door, just as he ran his face into Malachi's chest. Ha ha ha. Looks like that I beat ya, Malachi said as he smiled at his brother. I wonder where Eddie is? Then, as Malachi looked over his brother's shoulder, saw the ambulance coming around the corner. Look Malachi. There he is. Ronnie pointed to the roof of the ambulance where Eddie was standing on its top, with his arms out to his side. Eddie was acting as though the ambulance was a giant surfboard. Then, as the vehicle turned into the emergency entrance, Eddie jumped off of the side. That was fun guys, Eddie said loudly and then jogged over beside Ronnie and Malachi to await for Angel and their mom to come out of the ambulance. All right Angel. Just relax a moment, it's gonna be a little rough. The EMT said as the back doors of the ambulance opened. Then, just as the medic stepped out with the gurney, Karina stepped out following them. Hey Mom, Malachi said as she approached them. You guys have woken out of your nightmares already? Karina asked immediately as she took her attention off of Angel for the first time since they left the house. We woke up just after the ambulance pulled away from the house. Grandma Sanchez told us what was happening. How is Angel doing? Ronnie continued. Well really. As Karina continued to speak to her kids, they had followed Angel and the medics now along with hospital staff down a short hallway and then into the emergency room. Once in the emergency room, nurses immediately hooked Angel onto computers there in trade of the ones that belonged to the Advanced Life Support Unit. As Malachi, Ronnie, Eddie, and Karina all walked into the emergency room, they stood close to Angel as he, in turn, looked back to them. So. Eddie spoke up as he lightly placed his hand on Angel's chest. How are you feeling, bud? With his question, Eddie thought about the fact that he had just seen Angel's dead body upon a burial vault. With this image renewed in his mind, Eddie seemed to have lightly massaged a portion of Angel's chest, between two of the teen's ribs. Perhaps to convince himself that it was living tissue under his hand. I'm feeling alright. Confused I guess. The fact of the matter is that Angel was confused. More than anything, however, he felt scared, for the first time, of the one person that he had always, in the past, idolized. His grandfather, Miguel Sanchez. It had seemed, to Angel, that any time that he didn't respond exactly, or as fast as his grandfather wanted him to, that his grandfather would take steps to harm him. This time, his grandfather nearly killed him. There were times when Angel wanted to do the right thing by making his relatives aware of the hold that his grandfather had on him. Moments later, however, those thoughts were quickly washed away as his hopes of living a powerful life outweighed his fears. A powerful life promised to him by his grandfather. You know Angel, Karina said, Malachi, Ronnie, and Eddie are all good listeners if you ever need someone to talk to. Then, as she lightly picked his hand up, she continued, and so am I. Though both, Malachi and Ronnie had felt, to themselves, that Angel did have something that he wanted to share with them, they both had also sensed, that whatever it was, that Angel was perhaps scared to expose it. Well Angel. Ron spoke up, if you were to ever decide that you do want to talk to us about something. Anything, please remember that we are here for you. To help ensure Angel, Ronnie softly touched his forehead as he lightly rubbed Angel's eyebrow back towards his temple. It took roughly about an hour and a half for Dr. Redding to both come to the hospital and then to discharge Angel. Then, as Angel, Malachi, Ronnie, Eddie, and Karina all stepped outside, Karina, within Malachi's arms, and then Angel, within Eddie's arms, for safety, they all headed home. Without being in a rush, the 5 of them softly glided over roofs until they had reached the backyard of the family's house. Then, as they carefully sat down, on the back porch, they slid the sliding glass door open and then filed in. All within a very short period of time, everyone was clear of exactly what took place that evening. With this understanding, however, everyone was now fully aware of how much power that Miguel Sanchez possessed. The worst sort of power that would be used even towards his only fan. About 11 o'clock that night, both Karina and Mrs. Sanchez headed home. After they were gone, everyone else, including Angel, had tried their best to make the situation, within their home, as close to normal as they could. Now, I thought that Malachi's nightmares were over. Belinda spoke up as everyone was seated at the table for a late breakfast. They were, Malachi said, or at least we thought that they were. But you had all of the characters, within your dreams identified, Belinda continued after setting down a glass of orange juice. There's one more, Eddie said as he put some more oatmeal into Angel's bowl, there's that boy that has been hanging around with Miguel. We've got to figure out who that is. Until we do, these dreams will continue for all of us. Except Nicole. How are we gonna find out who that character is if we can't get close to him without Miguel chasing us away? Belinda asked. This dream was the worst one that she had experienced up to this point. Stop running, Eddie said firmly. Then, looking back up towards everyone at the table, he made direct eye contact with everyone and then, once again, in a much firmer voice, stop running. Though this wasn't a suggestion that everyone liked, everyone did know that Eddie was in fact exactly right. Ever since this character first came along, everyone had only ran as he would chase them with Miguel. Through all of this running, nobody took so much as a second to try to identify the junior troublemaker. The only thing that everyone was well aware of is that this character was not following the exact instructions of Miguel. This was obvious by the amount of arguing between them moments before their never-ending foot chase would begin. Though Angel was listening to the conversation between his relatives at the table, he had also, to himself, confided 100% into his grandfather's wishes. Anything. I'll do anything that you ask of me, Grandpa. Then, as he realized just how close his grandfather had come to killing him, he continued his thought. I love you, Grandpa, I'll never betray you again. I promise. Later, at about 6 o'clock in the morning, Angel had quickly fell asleep in hopes of making amends with Miguel Sanchez. This time he would be more speedy and less hesitant. Lucifin wasn't able to quickly get himself over the situation that had happened in his last effort to sleep. For the sake of better feeling of security, he didn't climb into his own bed, but rather into his parents' bed where he was more than welcome considering the circumstances. Any other night this idea would most likely be out the window. With Ronnie and Belinda, their situation, of which was only different because of the fact that their children were not involved, went on with their normal sleeping routine with their children within their cribs, that they had put together that evening after leaving the hospital with Angel. Eddie, as usual, laid back, in bed, with a book as he watched over Angel. Tonight, like most nights, Angel was very restless in his sleep. This Eddie had blamed on nightmares. Since the night that Angel had moved into the Declue residence, Eddie had come up with the concordant underscore that Angel had more frequent night terrors than anyone else. Eddie's original thinking behind this was based off of two simple facts within Angel's life. One was the fact that Angel's dreams seemed to always be violent based off of the fact that he was extremely restless in his sleep. And then the next reason that he had felt that the dreams were of those involving Miguel Sanchez is that he was more closely related to the old man. Miguel Sanchez was his grandfather rather than great-grandfather, or great-great-grandfather.